Hello dear friends, today I will show you a crucial chess pattern that will win you games without unnecessary calculations. It's white to play in this position, folks. While I set the context, please stop the video and try to find the only winning plan for white. Chess expertise involves the accumulation of so many chess patterns and chunks in your long-term memories. But some patterns are more important than others in a sense that there's a high chance of occurrence of those patterns. If you deeply internalize them, then you will win the games without necessarily overloading your working memories by move calculations. You will notice certain patterns instantly from the board once you store those patterns in your long-term memories. It's white to play, folks. If you look at the king's activity, black king is much more active than the white king. What are you seeing right now, folks? Please read the board properly. It's equal material, but the pawn structure is not symmetrical. White has 2 versus 1 on the queen side, while black has the pass pawn on f3. Okay, so what is white's goal from this position? We have to find a way to distract the black king to the queen side. So while the king is distracted, our king wants to collect the pawn on h6 and will promote our pawn. That's our only winning plan in this position with white. It looks strange, right? It looks like black king is more active. Black might be playing for a win, but we learn the function of the outside pass pawn. I made several videos on this theme on this channel. The outside pass pawn is usually a winning asset in a pawn endgame. It can even defeat the active king, as we will see in this position. Black king is more active, but if white creates the outside pass pawn, white will win this pawn endgame. But how? And that's what we are working on today's episode. How do you create a pass pawn on the queen side? Okay? Nimzowitsch said, candidate first principle. You look at your pawn that has no candidate in the opponent's camp. Namely, white has the extra a pawn on the queen side, black has no a pawn on the queen side. So this becomes your candidate pawn. Generally, when the idea is to create a pass pawn on that side of the board where we have the majority, we first roll the candidate pawn. That's the healthiest way to start the creation of a pass pawn operation. So congratulations if you found the move a3 from this position. The only move for white, really. But that's such a strong move that wins the game for white. Now, what is wrong with the move b3? Some of you might ask, hey, isn't this just much more direct? I will first play b3 and on the next turn I will go a4 and voila, there's a pass pawn for you on the queen side. This looks much faster indeed to create a pass pawn, but that's a terrible blunder because you're missing the opponent's best move. Can you guess it? b4. This is called deep freeze. A single pawn is freezing 2 of your pawns on the queen side. If you push a4, of course, en passant, and black pawn is promoting first. Suddenly after b4, can you see it? There is no chance for white to create a pass pawn. 2 versus 1 is meaningless. And now the king is much more active than your king. You're in zugzwang. They might even grab the pawn on h5, create the pass pawn and roll. Or, well, you have to drop back the king and then the king can improve. And black is winning this position. They can even play for stalemate trick. It looks like a stalemate. Indeed, you have the a pawn. It's not stalemate. After takes, you still have pawn moves left. Black will promote to a queen or rook with checkmate. So, going back to this position. Crucial chess chunk. I want you to encode this information in your long-term memories because this will happen again and again in your games, in pawn endgames. That's a crucial pattern to know. You first start with the candidate pawn. That's your candidate pawn. A pawn has no counterparts in the black camp, so a3, right? You stop b4 completely. What's the next move? Black needs to wait. What's the next move? Yes, b3 is the only winning move. And what's the next move, guys? You tell me if black keeps on waiting. a4. And finally, we created a beautiful outside pass pawn, right? That's what it's called, the outside pass pawn. The white pass pawn is a distant pass pawn. That's on the side of the board. Compare and contrast that with the pawn on f3, which is still quite close to the center. And also, crucially, our king is very close to that pawn. But look at the black king. The king is so far away to our distant passer, which means their king needs to get distracted to be able to stop the pawn. The king is inside the square of the pawn. The king can stop it. The problem is the king gets distracted to deal with that pawn. Meanwhile, our king will collect the pawn on h6. I will show you. Just so nice to see. The pawn will be grabbed, and then you will go, of course, king g7. The king is in Siberia. The black king, they cannot deal with our pawn, and we will win this game. So one move wins, the other move loses. That's pawn endgames for you. It's so sharp and concrete. Obviously, move by move calculations are also involved, but this is not move by move calculation. This is totally pattern based understanding. Once you know this pattern by heart, then a3 comes to your mind in milliseconds. Magnus Carlsen, c8 in milliseconds, because of his long-term memory is full of such useful chess chunks. And that's what we are training in my channel. So also we are learning this crucial information in its clean and nice medium, right? There's just very few pawns left on the board. So we are learning this in, let's say, in a less noisy environment. Now I will show you more complex examples that show the deeper similarities. By the way, after a3, king e4, b3, if the black king attacks our pawns, nothing changes. You can still go a4, and we are still winning this race because the outside pass pawn distracts the black king, and the game will be over after king g7, followed by promotion. Now you have this crucial chess chunk in your long-term memories. Can you please convert this position with white as simple as possible? White has one extra pawn in his pawn endgame. White is winning because in a pawn endgame, extra pawn is decisive, all that's being equal, of course. So white is winning, but how? That's a great training in position that you can give to your students, to your chess coaches. I'm also giving this to my own students in group lessons. This is beautiful because we see so many misconceptions in the student's brain, and we can discuss the best way of converting this position, and they shall get better in understanding why. Okay? White to play. Can you apply the concept of candidate pawn first principle, guys? Yes. The best move, to my mind, is the move d4. This is the typical way of converting. This way, first of all, multi-purpose move. Your king wants to go to d3 in two moves, but also you're pushing your candidate pawn first. This is the cleanest way for white to create a pass pawn, because that's your goal from this position, right? You somehow have to find a way to convert the majority, extra pawn, to a pass pawn, and maybe the black king will be distracted in dealing with that pass pawn, and your king will collect everything on the other side. We can even break down the winning plan using words from this position, right? That's always helpful. Break it down. What's your goal? Your goal ultimately is to create a pass pawn. Now, I will show you very quickly how I will play. Obviously, there are many different ways for white to play and win this position, but this is very logical. You move the king up to d3, you roll the pawn to e4, and then you improve your king further. If black doesn't play f5, we are coming there very soon. For example, they make a move like g6, you push the pawn to e4, you drive the king. That's always nice, right? We use our pawns to drive the king backward, and our king improved. And then you can, again, in this position, you can play in so many different ways, but you can even check and improve your king even further, move by move. And this game is totally finished because you're invading their camp on the side. If they keep on waiting, you will play f4 followed by d5, and the king will invade d7. You can even push d6, create a pass pawn, and win the game easily. But when I give this position to my students, occasionally they go wrong, actually. And actually two of them play the move e4 in our training game. Now, if you ask Stockfish, white is still winning with best play. But to my mind, this is not technical at all, okay? Because it allows me to play e5. Suddenly, can you see it? The pawn is a backward pawn on d2. It became more difficult for white to roll the pawn and create a pass pawn in this position. It's not full deep freeze yet, but you see some similarities to the deep freeze position I just showed you, okay? By playing e4, you lost flexibility in this pawn formation because you did not push the candidate pawn first. You allowed the pawn to come to e5, and now your candidate, which is still d pawn by the way, is more difficult to roll for white. King e2, king d6, king e3, king c5. And this way, I stopped the move d4, and now, of course, white is still winning. Stockfish says white is still winning, but now the game becomes messy. This will involve more concrete calculations. This will involve sharper treatments. This is not the most technical way to convert for white. And I will show you how my students went wrong from this position. One of them played the move g3, king c4. I keep on waiting. I keep on stopping d4. Okay, f4. They expect me to take. I will never take, of course. I play the move f6 because this pawn is crucial to stop the move d4. Okay, So g4 they played. And now e takes f4, king takes f4, king d3. Voila, I found a way to attack the pawn on d2. And now white is still winning with best play, but white needs to find a disgusting looking engine line to win this position. And for a human, when the clock is ticking, it's hard. It's hard to find the winning idea for white from this position. So I created a mess, I created chaos, and now they can't rely on those typical patterns to convert. For example, one of them played the move king f5, but white is no longer winning after takes h4 because the king is very close to the pawn. They can still play e5, but even this position looks like the white king is much closer to the pawns on the king side. It's not winning at all because my king is also quite close to those pawns. Attack the pawn, come back to h4, right? White has no time to gobble up all my pawns because my king is very active still. And now the game ended up in a draw like that. King f5, well, h6, I defend my pawn. I will grab the pawn on g4, and we both promoted at the same time against one of my students. And of course, there's no way for white to win this position. It comes with a check as well. And now the game actually ended up in a draw like that. The winning idea for white here was the move g5 directly. After takes, you don't take on f6, but you find the only move, h4, to win. That's my point. It looks disgusting already, move by move calculations. And well, that's a winning idea. You play e5, again, the only winning move. Crazy, right? Completely crazy. Because the point is that it looks identical to the first position with a big difference. Right now, white is playing the move h5, again, the only winning move for white. h6, the only winning move for white, because they basically create a scenario where h-pawn will drop and their king is ideally placed in this position. My king cannot reach f8 the moment I lose the pawn on h7, and white wins this position because of this line. But come on guys, come back to your senses. No human at intermediate level, when the clock is ticking, can see all these nuances from this position. They messed it up. They made it much more difficult on themselves to find the winning continuation by not pushing the candidate pawn first. Compare and contrast this winning idea with this idea I just showed you. The king moves up, you roll the pawn, and you win the game easily. I will come back to this position. We discussed this in a group lesson. My students understood the lesson, and the next week I gave them this position. Okay? White played very beautifully. They start with d4 and king d3. Now it's my turn to play with black. I play the move f5 because my plan is to stop them from pushing e4. How would you treat this position with the white pieces, guys? That's another chess pattern that I'm sure many of you already know. I will make a separate video about this concept as well. It's a hugely important concept. Also applies in the middle game, by the way. What's the most typical and the standard and the easiest way for white to convert this position? Please stop the video. Folks, nothing changed. You look at the structure, what's your goal? Your goal is to somehow find a way to play the move e4 and drive the king backward while your king will improve on the next turn, right? Because we have the majority, our goal is to also to be able to play e4 and drive the king backward. But if you play f3, you allow the move f4. And now it becomes more difficult for the pawn to reach e4 because they will take en passant, don't you think? So it's not like full deep freeze, but you sort of lose flexibility if you start with the move f3 in this position. But there's another pawn pattern, middle game pattern, that is called tortoise walk. It's slow like a tortoise, but it works. And the move is e3, guys. You start with the slow move e3. What's the point? You will then play f3 and I will play e4. It takes 3 full moves, but black cannot stop the plan. That's the beauty of this slow but efficient plan for white. e3, we have all the time in the world to play f3 and then e4, and the game will be over very, very quickly. Black has no way to really do anything to you. If they keep on waiting, f3 and then e4, the king has to drop back in this position. If they take, that's even better for us because king c4 is coming, right? Now we are one step closer to our dream. Even this position, I might ask you, find a way to convert this position to the extra pawn. Stockfish will give so many moves, of course, even h4 is winning. But to my mind, again, d5 is very logical because your goal is to ultimately create a pass pawn, also to improve your king. Now it just becomes zugzwang. Your king will gain more ground. If they make pawn moves, you can stop them altogether with move h4, for example. And now your king is gaining ground, attacking all these pawns. You can even dish the pawn directly and gobble up all the pawns, and white is winning. This is the most technical way to convert this position. But after f5, a couple of my students play the move f3 against me in my simultaneous exhibition games. And of course I play f4, I made it more difficult for them to push e4. Well, what else? They still pushed e4, and after takes, white is still winning with an extra pawn, obviously, okay? Now, this gave me a chance to play e5. As a defending side, I want to trade as many pawns as possible, right? That's usually a good strategy when you're defending with material down. You want to reduce the number of pawns in general, takes. And now we come to the second critical moment, guys. Beautiful moment. Now, if my students really truly understand the lesson from last week, then they should find a beautiful move for white in this position. And that's my question to you. Transfer is basically the skill of applying what you learned in one position, finding that deeper similarity, and apply the same pattern to a different position. Okay? It's a different pawn structure right now, but the concept is the same. To my mind, once again, guys, f4 is beautiful because that's your candidate pawn in this position, right? We have the f pawn, black has no f pawn in this position. So that's the most technical way to roll. King f3, if black plays the move h5, comes my next question, guys. That's a beautiful pattern as well. I'll make a separate video about this on YouTube. You sort of know the answer already. It connects to Turtle's Walk. White to play. What is the way to convert this position with white, guys? Yes, the move is g3. Right, you have all time in the world to play h3, g4, gain ground with your king and slowly improve your position. And white is winning with best play in this position. If you play the move h3, then you allow the move h4, it becomes much more difficult for white to roll the pawn to g4. It's sort of deep freeze of our two pawns. And if you play g4, takes, well, after g5, another pattern for us, they are forcing the pawn trade and rook pawn cannot convert, right? This connects to the strength of trading pawns in defensive context like that. If you leave white with the only rook pawn in this position, they have an extra pawn, but that's completely useless. So this was the only risk for white in this position. And then if you play h3, right, that's the risk. Because after h4, it's much more difficult for you to roll the majority in this position. But if you play the Turtle's Walk g3, it's very flexible. You have time to push h3 and g4. Student, in the actual game, play the move g4. That's a blunder. That's the wrong way of rolling your majority. That was your candidate pawn, but he pushed the pawn to g4. And can you guess my move that kept me in the game? Black has only one move that keeps them in the game right now. Of course, you know the pattern. g5. Now I'm stopping them from rolling f4. The pawn became backward, cannot even move forward. And suddenly, white's majority became useless. They cannot roll that easily. And white cannot win this position. Black has several ways to defend this position. King d4, king g3, king e3. Right? After h4, black can take on h4, followed by take on f3. And this game is a complete draw because the king will capture here. He will take here, just a stalemate. The other student did much better this time in this game, guys. After f5, he played the move e3, Turtle's Walk in action. I tried to exchange as many pawns as possible, but of course, he didn't care. He still follows his plan. e4 is coming on the next turn. They will create a decisive passer. And of course, after takes, they said, thank you so much. My goal was to create a pass pawn from the initial position and the mission accomplished for white, right? Now their extra pawn became a pass pawn. And white simply wins this position. There are so many ways to win this position with white. Even this way of playing is just winning, right? You just ditch the pawn and attack my pawn on the king side. And this game is totally finished because after takes, this pawn is queening ultimately, right? Very technical way to convert by Sam. Notice after f3, e4 doesn't help me at all because after takes, king c3, they still got themselves a protected pass pawn on d4. Huge achievement for white, of course. Well, black's pawns just run out at some point. Their king get to drop back, and this game is just a piece of cake to convert from this position. By the way, this feedback you can't receive from Stockfish. For example, one of my other students here played the move f4. This is still winning, says Stockfish. Stockfish cannot distinguish between the technical finish with moves like Turtle's Walk and other moves that look disgusting at first sight because white is forever taking this idea of e4 away from themselves by pushing the pawn to f4, yet this is still winning for white, but the win will involve disgusting calculations at some point. That is not necessary from this position. So we also want to make it very technical, very easy on ourselves by learning those crucial chess patterns. Let's conclude this long video with this example, guys. First of all, look at the board. What's going on here? It's white to play. What are you seeing? What are observations? I will give you the first move because you already know the first move. I'm sure if you follow this video very closely, I'm sure the first move will just come to your mind naturally, okay? But the second move will be your homework. So please bear with me, guys. First observations. Our king is more active than the black king. Our pawn is sort of defreezing the black pawns on the queen side, right? They cannot play b5 and create a pass pawn. That's a good thing for white. And we have 3 versus 2 majority on the king side. So the goal is to ultimately verbalize it. Ultimately, your goal is to somehow find a way to create a pass pawn on the king side and distract the black king. And once that's the case, your king will grab all the pawns and you will promote your a pawn. Is that clear? Please lay out the winning plan using words to yourself. Wouldn't that be lovely for white to see those developments? But how do you achieve your dream? What's the most technical move for white to achieve their dream from this position? And the move is f4. Of course, f3 is winning, says Stockfish. Maybe h4 is winning, says Stockfish, right? Even g3 is winning, says Stockfish. But f4 to my mind is very logical. Very logical, because now you're setting yourself for the long-term plan of this, create a pass pawn, distract the black king, and win the game on the queen side, okay? Please, g4. What are your thoughts about the move g4, guys? g4 loses for white. Incredible. Why? Because you allow the move g5. And now this pawn is defreezing both of your pawns, f and h pawns. Incredible, right? A single slip and black is winning this position because your pawns are frozen. If you keep on waiting, they will play the move b5 in this position. Another chess pattern for us, king b6, and now the king needs to babysit the pawn on b5. You can't move the king right now in this position, and well, your pawn moves are just coming to an end after h3, h6, the frozen structure. If you play king d5, you lose the pawn, and then this pawn promotes for black. So one thing is clear, g4 looks ugly, disgusting, and you're right, because after g5, black de facto plays with same amount of pawns on the king side. But to my mind again, f4 is so lovely. There is no way for black to deep freeze, nothing. But there is one nuance. The most practical move for black in this position is to play the move h5, right? They have to die with fighting at least. If they play the move h5, please guys, there's only one winning idea for white, and that's your homework position. If you truly grasped this lesson today, then you'll lay down the winning plan to me. You'll be successful in laying down the winning plan for me. Okay? Write to me on YouTube your thoughts, your observations, and what you learned from this video. My videos are designed, once again, to give you crucial chess chunks that has really high chance of occurrence in your games. Pawn endgames should be studied in depth because, well, many endgames can be reduced to a pawn endgame. They happen all the time, and this will give you confidence. If you know those recurrent and important patterns and chunks, your pawn play first of all will improve, but also your time management will improve because you will basically skip looking at random calculations, right? You will just basically look at the gist and understand the gist of the position. Certain chunks will come to your brain directly because of long-term memories full of those chunks. Magnus Carlsen seizes all these ideas in millisecond, by the way, because chess expertise mostly is due to patterns stored in our long-term memories. Knowledge is a huge thing with chess expertise, and you're knowing, you're learning new patterns, you're storing them in your long-term memories. So this kind of pattern-based study of the middle game and the end game and even the openings has huge potential dividends for you folks. If you like this video, if you want me to keep on producing similar content for you, please give me a like and subscribe to this channel and share my channel with a friend of yours who might benefit from its content. It's really word of mouth like this that help the channel grow, folks. I'm sort of bored by hearing that I'm the most underrated chess channel in the world that's been going on for like last 2 years. So maybe I need to ask your help to spread the word, to really tell the world about my channel so I can continue doing what I'm doing in my videos. Learning is a great joy, and I'm sure that's what brings you back to this channel. I'm doing my best to make this learning journey as fun and as engaging as possible for you, while always doing my best to avoid drama, avoid BS, and give you those chunks that are quite crucial and useful for your own games. Thank you so much, folks, and I will see you very soon.